All right. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Crispino. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Ecosystem here at Genesys, and this is our monthly Devcast series. This is an Ask Me Anything session, so I'm going to open it up to everybody here to ask questions. I have some previously submitted, so I'm going to go through those first. But if you have a question today, please put it in the Q&A widget on Zoom, and I will get to those after I go through the ones that were previously submitted. And before we get started, there won't be a 10-minute Q&A because this whole thing's a Q&A. This is our stock slides here. I am recording this tutorial. We will upload it to our Genesys community YouTube channel, and it will be available from the Developer Center. If you go to developer.genesys.cloud and go to the video section, you will be able to see this and all the previous devcasts that we have had. All right, with that said, I am going to stop sharing for a moment and switch over to my other screen. Give me one moment, please. Here we go. And I've got Genesys Cloud here because that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. And I will just launch into it here. So we had a question submitted from Christy McDaniel. I don't know if Christy's on here. Let me see if she is. I don't see her in the participants, but hopefully she'll see this being recorded. And wanted to ask, is it possible to implement a method to hold emails sent after business hours so that SLA calculations do not get included for non-work hours? I have to admit, I am not an expert on SLA calculations and how all that works, but my guess would be that once that email hits a queue, most of our system is built around queues and metrics on queues and agent handling, not necessarily how much time it spends in the IVR. And really, for an email, the IVR should be a minuscule amount of time. So my guess, and again, I'm not sure about this, but my guess would be if you would create an unmonitored queue, so just like a holding queue that has no members in it, and put emails into that as they come in after hours. So in the architect flow, check your business hours. If it's after hours, put it in this unmonitored queue, and then have, well, you know what, now that I say that, I wonder if in-queue call flows for email work. Let me, I want to say use an in-queue call flow, but that may not work. So if I go to architect, I think we have in-queue call flows for email. It's not something I do every day. In-queue email flow. So if you were to create an in-queue email flow, that flow is going to execute on all emails that are sitting in a queue. So if you had an in-queue email flow that monitored business hours, and once the business hours come back into operation, it would do a transfer of that email from the holding queue to the actual, let's send this to an agent queue. I believe your SLAs, you could then have your SLAs calculated off of the let's send it to an agent queue. That's my guess. I would have to set that up and see how analytics does with that. But my guess is you could keep the holding queue out of the SLA calculations if, potentially. So that's what I would try. If that doesn't work, then there probably is no way to keep it out of the Genesys SLA calculations. You might have to use some third-party system, reporting system that would be able to eliminate queues from the calculation. All right, the next one's from Mark Devern. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He did put in how to pronounce his name. I'd like to know how Agent Assist can facilitate the retrieval of articles from an external knowledge source. This could involve either an automated process for importing let me see what he says, for importing external knowledge into Genesys knowledge base or utilizing the API to access information from third parties. All right. For Agent Assist, I'm going to assume you're talking about the native Genesys Agent Assist, because we have a lot of third-party Agent Assist components. Google CCAI can pull data from a knowledge base. Most of our third-party vendors that have integrated to Genesys that have a knowledge-based system also have some kind of Agent Assist capability. So if you were to go to the AppFoundry and look for those, you'd see several. If you search for just Agent Assist, you would see a lot. As far as the native Agent Assist, there, to my knowledge, there's no ability to tell it to pull knowledge from a third party. It's Genesys's Agent Assist. It was meant to pull data from Genesys's knowledge base system. And if you go to the Developer Center, we do have an API for you to load knowledge in. So if I go to API Explorer, and if I uncheck everything and go to just knowledge, you can use this API. And I've done this once, so I'm not intimately familiar with exactly what APIs to call, but you can import knowledge into a knowledge base. You can even create a knowledge base, right? You can create a knowledge base with the API, and then you can post knowledge articles into this from Genesys. So you'd have to keep, I'm assuming you have knowledge in one repository, so you'd have to have some kind of synchronization process that runs between the two knowledge bases to keep them in sync. I know that's not optimal. It'd be nice to have one source of truth. If you don't want to do some kind of synchronization between two knowledge management systems, and you just want that one source of truth, go to the Developer Center and go to Blueprints and search on this screen. Don't use the search, because it's actually on this page. And if you look for Agent Assist, now look for assist. And if we get there, so that's a chat assistant, translate assistant. Hold on just a moment. Message translation assistant, email translation assistant, Birch. Hang on just a moment. There is a blueprint here. Oh, it actually might be the chat or the messaging assistant. So if you click on the deployment guide for chat assistant, or the one, I think there's one for messaging, which is our newer, build a messaging translation, email translation. I'm going to go around again. Go to the chat one. Sorry. Go to the chat one. And Agnes Corpus wrote this article, and it's a really good boilerplate, I'll say boilerplate tool to build an interaction widget. And if I scroll down here, you can see some screenshots of what they built here. So you get this interaction widget that'll hang off to the right while you're handling conversations. And it can be chat, it can be messaging, it could even be voice. This particular integration is monitoring the messages that come through in a chat conversation. And like I said, it can also monitor the messages if you adapt it to do so. You can subscribe to messages, and you could even subscribe to the voice transcription that's being done by Genesys. If you're a GC3 customer, license level, or you've got the WEM add-on where Genesys can do transcription on the fly of voice calls, you can use that as a text-based input to your Agent Assist. And as you get those messages, you could be doing lookups in that third-party knowledge system. Most knowledge-based vendors have some API where you can submit a search request, and they'll give you a response back of the matching answers and their what do I want to say? The percentage on the match. You know what the most match, the highest percentage match is, and you can display those in your own component here. So it would be a little bit of work, a little bit of development work, but you all hopefully are developers. You're attending the Devcast. I would hope building a little web-based agent assist might not be beyond the capabilities. And like I said, this is a good boilerplate. It already has the interaction widget code. It uses the notification API to subscribe right now to chats, but subscribing to messages and subscribing to transcription is trivial. And then when you get those events from Genesys, you can then take the payloads from those events that are the messages or the transcription and do the search on that. So those are your two options: synchronize a knowledge base or build your own agent assist widget. Or a third option is go look for, if you have a knowledge base vendor, there's a good chance they've already integrated to Genesys. And if not, they may be interested in doing so on your behalf and making it available to other Genesys customers. So those are kind of the three options there. All right, next one that I have is Jennifer Desere asked, with reports being deprecated, are there plans to fill the gaps between the functionality reports offered, such as running a year's worth of data and performance moves? There is somewhat. So let me show you. So let me bring this up just so you can see analytics as a service. All right, so Genesys Professional Services, okay, which is our consulting branch of Genesys, built a product called Analytics as a Service. And what it does is it takes historical data out of Genesys Cloud, makes it available in a database that you can do long-term reporting. Now, I'm not necessarily promoting this particular product. There are other great products in the AppFoundry that also offer database analytics, Pure Insights, Bright Metrics, a couple of others. So if you go in and just search for analytics, you're going to find a lot of vendors that do something similar. The reason I'm talking about this one is the Genesys product team just took this over from Genesys Professional Services, and we're going to incorporate it into the product. So you will have the ability, I don't know if it will be an additional fee or not, or if it comes free, I don't know those details, but this will be our out-of-the-box reporting analytics service for those long-term historical reports that you're wanting to get. So as I said, I'm not saying this is better than some of our others from third parties. Everybody has a little bit of secret sauce to their product offering. So if you just go to the AppFoundry and search for analytics or reporting or something, there's quite a few out here that do analytics, and maybe reporting is actually a better keyword to search for. To see the vendors, there's Pure Insights, there's eMight, that have been around doing this for a long time as well. So all right, the next question, Chris Florio, trying to write some code to interface with the API using JavaScript's Pure Cloud Platform Client Library. I'm not having luck finding what endpoint I need to interface with to change the text of a TTS action in the Arc. Okay, so Chris, it sounds like you're looking for an API that would allow you to modify the text built into an architect call flow to change the text that's spoken in TTS in an architect, and you want to do that programmatically. That is one of the that's one of the missing pieces in our API is we don't have an API that will allow you to go into a call flow and change the text. Well, change anything about a call flow. We don't have an API for that. What we do have, and your mileage may vary with this as well, but we do have a tool called Archie. That's the blog. Give me a second. Appendix Archie. Let's go here. Let's pick this one. Archie is a tool that you can use on a command line or a CI/CD pipeline or a nightly cron job. What it allows you to do is define your call flows using YAML. So YAML's a text-based, tabbed-based, hierarchical definition language. You can define your call flows, and you can kind of see in this little screenshot. I know this is probably a little small. I don't think if I increase that, it's not going to increase the black area. But if you go to this link, I'll put this in the chat. Go to that link. You can look. They're defining an inbound call flow here, and so it's a language built to create call flows, and those can be imported. So it's a command line tool that you can use to schedule this YAML file to be imported into Architect. So as long as you use the YAML file as your source of truth and don't go in and muck things up with the Architect UI, because it'll get out of sync with your YAML file. But if you strictly stick to your YAML file, you could update the text here and import it when it needs to be imported. If you do want to allow like simultaneous, I want to maintain stuff with YAML, but I also want people to be able to go in and change Architect call flows, you could do these as common modules. You could import common modules that would speak certain texts, or be the lead into a navigation tree or something. You could update the common modules. The Architect flow that people are messing with in Architect could call that common module, and then you could allow kind of the best of both worlds. That's about all I can think of to keep those in sync. The only other possibility would be maybe have a data action that goes out to hits a database or hits a service that would return all of the text strings possibly used in your Architect flow. So if you've done any localization work in JavaScript or something like that, you have those I18N files that have the key and the value of all the text you might use in your JavaScript. And that way you can localize an app by having all these separate files. If you did something like that, where you had a file or a service or a database that had a key for the text name and then the value of it, call a data action, import all that in, and then when you're doing TTS, just access the variables returned by the data action to speak those. That would be another option. That actually might be a better option than doing the Archie stuff. Just as a way to keep all that text basically localized outside of Architect via data action. All right, and the last question I had is from Amanth Kumar. I'm not going to try the last name. This is just kind of general questions. So he's got a couple of general questions about the API. How often the API schema changes and how this is communicated. So we have on the Developer Center, if you go to developer.genesys.cloud, you can go to the announcements section. So this is kind of reactive, or this is proactive. You have to manually go out here, and we make announcements here. And when we're changing stuff, if there's going to be something deprecated, there's going to be a change to an API, you can read about it here. So It is also available if you go to the developer forum. So if you go to the main landing page and go to the forum, and you go to the announcements section, if you create a login to the Developer Center, you can subscribe to a feed of these forums. So if you want to be emailed on a daily or weekly basis of announcements that have been made by Genesys, this is a good way to do that, to keep in lockstep. We announce everything through here. So everything here is also mirrored on that announcements page in the Developer Center. So you can subscribe to this. You'll get an email feed of anything that changes. We don't change that often, so probably a weekly subscription to this is probably sufficient. So you can enable notifications, and a weekly feed is probably sufficient. You'll get notified of when things happen. The last place, and not everything is here, but if you can log into Genesys Cloud and you go to admin, over here on the right are our release notes. Every Wednesday, we post out the changes for the platform. And occasionally, not every time, you'll find stuff in the open platform. Open platform is our API, right? That's our open API. You'll find stuff in there, and you might find it sprinkled around in other things or changes that are made. So if you click on the link there, it'll take you to the release notes, and then you can look in open platform and you can see, architect workflow trigger automation. You can read about triggers, and you can read about accelerators and things like that. So those are the ways to keep up on changes to the API schema. We try not to do breaking changes. We really do our best. We realize that if we make a breaking change, it's going to affect our customers and our AppFoundry partners, and we really don't want to inflict that kind of pain. Sometimes it's necessary to make a breaking change, and if we do, we try to give 3 to 6 months notice if we have that luxury, so that you all can schedule that in a future sprint and get those changes applied. All right. Also, Hemeth has a question on how often the Pure Cloud Platform Client v2 package is upgraded. So you are talking there about, let me go back to the Developer Center. And platform clients, gotta remember where they are. I don't pull them so often. I think they're down here in the developer applications platform, not CLI, platform client SDKs. So you're probably talking about these clients. These are the wrappers. These are the SDK wrappers that are wrapped around our API. No one likes to code REST APIs by hand. You can if I guess somebody probably likes to do that. I don't. This is an SDK wrapper. So we've got wrappers in a lot of common languages that wrap our API and make it easier to call those from JavaScript, Java, C#, Python, etc. These are built with our platform. So as APIs, as the engineering team releases APIs and API updates and changes, with that build process, our SDK wrappers are built in lockstep. So they're not built at us, we don't choose to build them every 6 months or something like that. They're built in lockstep. So in terms of versioning numbers, though, there are version numbers. So like if you're including this, if you're using our CDN, right there is a version number. That really isn't announced. That's probably something we need to do a better job on. We need to announce not only the platform client API, but the client apps SDK version as well. We need to do a better job on putting that in the announcements when those versions change. Generally, if you were to code something and keep it at the version you coded at, it likely would work for quite a while. I've personally seen development done that is, way back on the versions. Everything still runs. They just can't take advantage of the newer APIs that have come out in those SDKs. So there is, on the platform client, there is a latest. So you can always put in latest here and it will automatically upgrade you instead of putting a specific version number. The client apps SDK does not have a latest virtual link. So that one you do have to maintain on your own. And Hema's last question is, what is the best way to repull the incomplete conversation? So well, pulling conversations is done with the conversation API. So if you're gonna pull the conversation API, it's quite a ways down here. Allow me to scroll. I'm going to get past all of the specific ones, all of the media type specific ones, and you get down to the bottom and you can get to API v2 conversations and just the ID. So here's get a conversation if you have the conversation ID. The Genesys conversation model is interesting. That's probably the best way I can put it. For voice conversations, those are kind of really pretty straightforward. We, once the conversation ends, it's kind of done. There could be, an extra service that runs, like the transcription service, that runs after the conversation ends. So conversation ends, the recording service runs to package that up and put that out on an S3 bucket. The transcription service runs to transcribe it and update the transcription. There's a kind of a pipeline of things that might happen, but within, 30 minutes or so, that conversation is probably done and wrapped up, and it's not going to be updated again by the system. And the conversation JSON is going to be pretty static from that point on. That's not a promise. The conversation JSON really can be updated at any time in our conversation model, but generally that conversation is done. Messaging, which is our text-based channels, and emails, those two are more asynchronous, longer-lived. I think, at least for messaging, we give up to 3 days. I think the same is true for emails. We give up to 3 days for responses to come in. So, if you're having a text thread conversation with a customer, and that could go back and forth for multiple days, as long as there's an active message one way or the other, that conversation is still technically active until there's 3 days of inactivity. So I guess my point with that is you may have to keep querying until you get to the period of when that is supposed to end. Now, how do you determine if it's going to end? I think I got to think where that timeout is. There is a timeout. Is it on the queue? Maybe it's on the queue level. If I just go to my customer support queue, is it on messaging? I'd have to look around a bit. I don't want to tie up the time on this to look around at that, but there is a timeout. And it might be a system level timeout even, of when message transactions end, when email transactions end. So it might actually be in the organization settings under admin, organization settings. It might just be like a global, how long to keep those around. So you might dig into here. If you really want to, go to the resource center, go to help.mypurecloud.com and search. That'll tell you how to find that. If you can figure out like what is set up on a per customer basis on when that conversation is set to end, you could query up to that time. If you see no activity, you can assume it's done. So, all right. So that ends the pre-asked questions. It looks like I have a couple in the Q&A. So let me go through those. So Aubrey asks, is there a way to easily capture the agent's time zone within the call data so that the reporting team can better separate calls from various groups and group them by area region where calls are received. The agent's time zone, it's unlikely that's in the conversation call data. It's unlikely. We're gonna have the agent's user ID, their GUID, the GUID for the agent in there as a pointer to the agent profile that would contain their location and maybe their time zone there. You would almost have to, do an API request to go hit that API for the agent information to find out their location and or time zone, to kind of pull that back into your reporting data. Or if you're using, one of the analytics vendors to export that to a searchable database, you could do a join, right? You can do a join of the conversation data against the agents that were involved, and in that join have that data available, so that then you could have a win or a filter clause or something to do group buys on time zones. So hope that answered that question, Aubrey. If not, post back in there and I'll try to answer it further. All right. Some anonymous attendee. That's interesting. Okay. I need to capture agent ID who transferred an outbound call to post-call survey after conversations done with customer, and write agent name to external database through web service. Any advice how to write variable to capture agent name in architect flow when transfer call to post-call survey? Okay, in the architect flow, when you get a call, so the call comes into the architect flow, I'm assuming you've got something on your script or something that's transferring that call to a call flow that's going to implement that external survey. You can get the conversation ID in Architect, and once you have the conversation ID, you can do a pure cloud Genesys Cloud Data Action. Sorry for the pure cloud thing. If you go to admin and you go to integrations and you add in an integration and you look for just data actions, we have Genesys Cloud Data Actions. So this particular integration is built to make API requests against Genesys specifically, and it can be used in our architect flow. So call gets transferred to architect, you execute a Genesys Cloud Data Action against the conversation ID, which will get you the conversation JSON back. From that, you can get the agent's GUID. Just in the previous comment, I said you'll get that GUID. You'll get the GUID of the user, of the agent. You can take that as an input to a second data action request to the user API v2 users with the user ID, with the GUID, and get the agent name, phone number, their time zone, their location, everything about it, anything in their user profile is available to you at that point. And then you can call the third data action that if you wanted to push that out to a third-party database, you could. That would be a web service data action. So web service data actions are HTTP requests out of Genesys to a third party. So you'd have a third data action, but this one would be a web services one, calling that remote system to push out the agent name to the survey tool. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. That's the most straightforward. So data actions are, I think they're intuitive. A lot of people have trouble with them. If you really read through the docs are pretty good. If you go to help.mypurecloud.com. So data actions, even though they're kind of developer related, they're not necessarily covered on the developer center. So if you go to the resource center, help.mypurecloud.com, and look up data actions. Give it a minute. Sorry for my internet. All right, so about Genesys, well, that's Genesys Cloud Data Actions. I guess you can go there. Really, this about data actions integrations, this is our landing page for just general data actions. So you can call a AWS Lambda, you can call a Genesys Cloud API. We've got pre-built third-party data actions specifically for, like, if you work with Salesforce, we've got an integration that can talk directly to the Salesforce API. And then we have this web services data action, which is really for just a generic HTTP request to just about any system. But if you click into any of those, like the Genesys Cloud one, it'll talk about how to set up the data actions, how to authenticate, how to make those requests, et cetera. So read about data actions and see how you can utilize those to get your survey information that you need. All right. Another one, I've been writing JavaScript for nearly a decade, but frequently find myself in over my head. The docs don't say much sometimes. Sometimes it'll be one word like participant ID without saying which participant, or at a time you should use a notification and other times not. Is there a course or a structured series of tutorials or some other resource available somewhere? Yeah, that's a loaded question. I don't believe that even the Genesys Beyond is our training group here at Genesys. So the Beyond team does training. I know they've got some training on development, but probably not at the detailed level that you're looking for. I would suggest that if you have questions, go to the Developer Center and use the forum link. Go to the Developer Center, go to the forums. And when you come to the forum, the platform API, that's kind of the one where everybody spends most of their time. Web messaging is another popular one, and data actions are popular. So, you can pick the right category. Don't stress over it. If you put the wrong thing into the wrong category, we're still going to answer it. Go into here. First, I would suggest just search. If you're struggling with something, it's likely somebody else has struggled with it, and somebody's probably asked the question. I mean, we've had the forum going for a decade now. I mean, Genesys Cloud's been around for a while. The forum's been around for a while, and we've got questions from back in a long time. So ask your, search first, or just post in, create a new topic, put your question in. We're pretty responsive. There's no SLAs on this. This is a kind of a community forum, but we do have moderators. Our developer ecosystem and evangelism teams are monitoring these forums. We try to answer questions as quickly as possible and as time allows. Sometimes it takes us research, right? So sometimes you all ask some questions that we have to go dig, and it takes us a day or so to kind of work up a scenario and see what we would suggest. But generally, we try to get you an answer on the forum. So that would be my suggestion. As we're not going to have detailed training that's going to train you on every API and what every parameter means. And I hear your item about sometimes the input just says participant ID and doesn't really give you much more. That is something we try to work on our APIs and get those documented well. If you have a specific API that's giving you trouble with that documentation, when you ask your question on the forum, put that in, and we'll bring that up with the engineering team and get them to document that in some future sprint. So, all right. Derek, you said, I did not see you paste in the chat. I pasted some. Oh, you're right, Derek. I pasted that too. Just panelists, which is pretty much just me since I don't have panelists today. I'm going to put Archie. Archie's the only link I put in here. There you go. There you go, Derek. Thank you for that. All right. Chris Florio, did you have an email address we could contact you on. If you don't want to give it to the class, you can just shoot me an email. All right. Yeah, I don't mind. So I'm going to put it in the chat here. I will say I work with the AppFoundry team. I work on the AppFoundry team here at Genesys. We have almost 400 partners these days. I get bombarded with emails. So I do get through them. I mark them. I flag them for follow-up. I will get to them. It might take me some time if you email me directly. So, just know I may not get back to you instantly, but I will try and follow up. If you really just have a general development question, again, post it on the forum. I monitor that. Our teams monitor that. I'm not the only one with developer knowledge here at Genesys. There are plenty that have more knowledge than I do. And I would say just if you post in the forum and you have a specific question for me, you can even put that in there. You can say, hey, Jim Crispino was talking about this on the Devcast. And if it's not me monitoring that post, they will at me at that, and I'll get notified, and I will pop in and answer it specifically if you're addressing me in the forum. So, all right, hope that answers that. And then Chris also has an actual follow-up question for Archie. Is there a way to export the current YAML that you mentioned? Yeah, yes. Yes. So if I go to a call flow, so here, let me go into my call flow. I'll just go into this one. All right. If you go to export and export as YAML, that will take this call flow and export it to YAML. And then at that point, once you got it out, so let's just go ahead and do this. All right, let me grab that. I'll just bring it up in here. That apparently didn't open it there. Let's see. There it is. Oh, I see what it's doing. Let me do it this way. There we go. Let me open that. Visual Studio Code. Let me grab that and bring that over here. So here is that call flow in YAML. It's not a very interesting call flow, but you can see it's like here. So here's the TTS, right? Here is what's going to be spoken at that prompt. This is the main menu prompt for main menu 10. You're at the main menu, press or say 1. So, if you wanted to change that text, you could save that YAML and then use Archie to import that back in. So yeah, that's the easy way to do it. Unfortunately, I don't know why they didn't do this. We also have an import. So where do you do imports? I don't do imports very often. You can add. Is it add? No, it's not add. Oh, maybe it's actually in the call flow. I think it is. I'm at a loss. They changed the user interface of Architect recently, and I haven't been in here. There is a way to import a call flow, and I'm at a loss on how to do it right now. But you can import the, what do they call it? i3 call flow, the .i3 call flow format. So like you can export, oh, here you go, i3 inbound flow. You can import those. You can't import YAML, and I don't know why, but you can't. So kind of weird. You can only use Archie to bring YAML into the system. So, all right. Can you provide additional information and recommendations for delving deeper into Genesys knowledge base? Kind of. So the Resource Center, knowledge, let's just do knowledge base, maybe all one word. Let's see what that gives us. So the Resource Center is our user's guide. Genesys Knowledge Management is a productized thing. So this is probably it. It's probably called Knowledge Workbench. Oh, that's the old one. You want the V2. About Knowledge Workbench V2. So we had an old version of the Knowledge Workbench. We've got a new version. So make sure you're looking at the V2 information. This will give you everything you need to know about how to create knowledge articles and such, how to optimize your knowledge base. You can even the knowledge base can be used for intent when you're using Genesys bot flows. I mean, it's all kind of one big system that works together. So Agent Assist, knowledge management, and bot flows, they all kind of work together to surface up knowledge and determine intent and try to answer questions and stuff. So look in here. This will give you information on how to use knowledge management, and that's available in admin. I think it's got its own heading. I think there is a knowledge. Yep, there's a knowledge heading. If you have the right permissions, so the articles usually tell you. Let's see if it tells us in the overview here. So you've got to have these permissions, prerequisites. Your user has to have these permissions. If you have those permissions, you'll see a knowledge section in admin, and you can go create categories. These are knowledge bases and labels and other things that are there. You can create articles, and I don't have any set up in my system. But that's actually, maybe I do. I bet I do. Looks like it started an AppFoundry FAQ kind of. So so you can create these articles and see and make them available. So everything you see here has the API behind it. So what I always tell people, if you go look under the covers, just use the developer tools in the browser, right? And you go look under the covers, look on the network tab and watch what we do. And I open that, kind of look at, I bet it's this one. Let's see, headers. So here, API, mypurecloud.com, API, V2, knowledge bases, and then the ID of the knowledge base and documents. So this went in and got that document with that document ID. You can kind of go see. It's actually, that was the options. Here's the get. Here's the response. You can see what Genesys user interface is doing. You can make those same API requests. So hopefully that answers your question and kind of helps get you going with that. Coming up on time, I got 10 minutes. I got 2 more questions. Can a user who is not I'm guessing not on an interaction, invoke a contact center script from the apps menu? I want to use the script to invoke other Genesys APIs. Can a user who is not on an interaction, I guess I'm not on an interaction, invoke a contact center script from the apps menu? So that's a really good question. My guess would be, where's my developer center? Bear with me. Scripts. I think I have a feeling this API, this scripts API, is more designed around creating and publishing scripts in the admin tool and not so much showing it. Scripter is a pretty old component of the system. It was one of the original components along with Architect, and it doesn't have a great API for it, kind of like Architect. So I don't think there's a way you can execute a script. What I would encourage you to do is just use the Client Apps SDK. So go to look for Client Apps SDK. And let me put that link in the chat for anybody who wants it. Write a little page. Write a little page, and it can be off the apps menu on the top nav bar, or while they're handling an interaction. It could be an interaction widget that they could access. You can even have a button on the interaction widget that actually executes whatever code you want in JavaScript. But then you can use the platform SDK to make those same API requests you would do in a data action within a script. You can make those Genesys API calls. That gives you a lot more flexibility because you actually own the code. You're not limited by what scripter does and doesn't allow. You can even make it a web page, right? You've got a UI. We're going to iframe whatever URL you say for the apps menu link, or even the interaction widget. That's an iframe too. So you can have a UI there. You can present data to them. You can execute JavaScript in the back to make API requests and do things and update the UI. Building an integration like that is way more flexible. I get the value of scripter. If you're not a hardcore coder, maybe an interaction widget or a standalone client app kind of seems a little daunting. There's lots of examples. We've got lots of examples you can take as boilerplate code to build those things. So that's what I would do if it were me. So I hope that helps. That was for David. Things keep flowing in here. Okay, looking for a way to get E911 alerts out to supervisors, people within the business faster, specifically aiding in the effort to provide more info, such as who called, where the agent's calling from, and listen to the call to get additional details on the emergency. My question is, do you know have a best practice used by other customers using triggers and workflows, such as if this is an outbound DNS and send an email and use the workflow to gather information? Really, we don't have a great mechanism for like a broadcast message directly to a supervisor that's going to do a toast to them. But what we do have is we have webhooks to post into chat groups. So let me show you. If Genesys has a built-in UC system, just like Teams or Slack, okay? So, you've got people in your organization. I could chat directly with Prince. I could chat with a group. If there's a customer service group, I could chat into there. In the past, I've used this developer support group to post things, make webhook calls to put troubleshooting and debugging information in to see what's going on in triggers and workflows and things. So you can post a message into a chat using our webhook integration. And if you at the person, right, if you know the supervisor's name, you can put at and the supervisor's name into the message. They should get a little notification in the upper right that a message was posted for them, and a little red splat will show up on the chat here to indicate that there's a message waiting for them, and it will highlight in what group or even in their direct message if there's a message waiting for them, so that they can go right to that group and look at that. Webhooks are an integration. So if you go to admin and you go to integrations, add an integration, webhook. Oh, sorry, add integrations, webhook. You want generic chat notifications. That'll post into Genesys Cloud chat groups. Documentation is on the Resource Center. I think it's on the Resource Center. I think there's docs also on the Dev Center for webhooks. So here's how to add a webhook integration and the different ones that we have. And the resource center, I'm losing my tabs. All right, let's just go here. I'm running out of time. I think if you look for webhook here, no, that's not, gotta find the right here. We go overview of webhooks. So you just send messages. You can even send metadata to filter on them. You'll get a webhook URL when you install the integration. That'll be the endpoint you call. You just post messages in there. So that's about the only way I know to work with that. All right, Jen, the call flow earlier is already published and it's not editable. That is why oh, thanks, Jen. That's why there was no import. It wasn't in edit mode. If I would have been in edit mode, you could import the I3 inbound flow file is what you could import. Thank you so much. Sorry. All right, using the WebRTC SDK, I sometimes get session-ended events when users are not on a call. Any idea what could cause that? Can those be ignored? I don't have a lot of personal experience with the WebRTC SDK. I've never written my own WebRTC endpoint. I don't know what would cause a stray event like that. My guess is maybe there's some timeout or Genesys uses AWS. It's all built on top of AWS. And we use auto scaling. It's very possible that the WebRTC client is connected to a node that scaled up when it was needed, right? So it's connected, it's getting WebRTC traffic from some service node, and that node got dropped. And you may get a session ended event because of that, and the WebRTC component will automatically reconnect and reestablish to a new WebRTC service node, potentially. I mean, I'm not saying that's what's happening. I could conceive of that happening. So you might get just stray WebRTC session ended. Not that session's not necessarily a call. It might be your session dropped because the node you were connected to dropped and it had to be reestablished. So that would be all I can think of is why you would get those. All right. I think we're at the end of the questions. We're at the end of our time. I thank you all. My wife said, "Are you prepared for anything? What if anybody asks you what is the best kind of elephant to have for a pet?" So nobody asked me anything crazy like that. So I thank you for your questions. We do these sessions occasionally, and watch for your email. There is a place to sign up for the Devcast notifications and newsletters. We'll send you a monthly newsletter, let you know what's coming up, advertise the Devcast. That way you can get signed up and listen to more of these. And the recording of this session will be on our YouTube channel at our videos link, which is just right here at the very bottom. You can see the Devcast and all this one and all the previous ones will be out on our YouTube channel. So thank you all for joining, and we will see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.